The scream of the cow echoed through the barn just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the Missouri hills, and Olivia Zimmerman knew with absolute certainty that if she did not act in the next few minutes, both the animal and its unborn calf would die before midnight. She had been riding past the ranch on her way back to town when she heard the sound, a desperate lowing that made her pull her mare to an abrupt halt on the dusty road. The property belonged to someone named Yates, she had heard in town, a cattleman who had recently expanded his operations near Wyatt, Missouri. The year was 1884, and this part of the country was still rough around the edges, still finding its footing between the untamed wilderness it had been and the civilized territory it was trying to become. Olivia had grown up on a farm in Illinois, the only daughter among four brothers, and her father had taught her everything he knew about animals before consumption took him 3 years ago. After his death, her mother had remarried quickly to a man Olivia could not stand, and at 22 years old, she had packed what little she owned and headed west to make a new life. She had been in Wyatt for only 2 months, working as a seamstress in a shop on Main Street, but her heart had never truly left the land and the animals she had grown up tending. The cow screamed again, and Olivia did not hesitate. She tied her mare to the fence post and hurried toward the barn, her practical cotton dress kicking up dust as she moved. The structure was well built, she noticed, with solid timber walls and a roof that looked recently repaired. Someone took pride in this place. Inside, the scene was chaos. A massive red cow lay on her side in the straw, her belly distended and her eyes rolling with pain and fear. A man knelt beside her, his hands covered in blood and birth fluid, his face twisted with frustration and worry. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and shoulders broad enough to suggest years of hard physical labor. His shirt was soaked through with sweat despite the cool evening air. "Who are you?" he demanded, looking up as Olivia entered. His voice was rough with stress, but she could hear the underlying desperation. "Someone who can help," Olivia said, already moving toward the cow. She could see immediately what the problem was. The calf was breech, its hindquarters presenting first instead of the head and front hooves. Without intervention, the cow would exhaust herself, trying to push the calf out in the wrong position, and both would die. "The veterinarian was supposed to be here an hour ago," the man said, returning his attention to the cow. "I sent my foreman into town to fetch him, but there has been no word. I have been trying to turn the calf, but I cannot get a proper grip." "Let me try," Olivia said, kneeling beside him in the straw. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the set of his jaw that suggested he had been fighting this battle for longer than an hour. "I need you to keep her as calm as possible. Talk to her. Keep your hand on her neck." He stared at Olivia for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Then he nodded and moved to the cow's head, murmuring soft words while keeping one hand steady on the animal's neck. Olivia rolled up her sleeves and examined the situation more carefully. The calf was alive. She could feel it moving slightly. But it was stuck, and time was running out. "What is your name?" the man asked as Olivia worked, her hands moving with practiced confidence despite the difficulty of the task. "Olivia Zimmerman," she replied, not looking up. "And yours?" "Russell Yates. This is my ranch." His voice was strained. "That cow is Bess, and she is carrying what should be my finest calf of the season. Her bloodline is exceptional, and I paid a fortune for the bull that sired this calf. If I lose them both, it will set my entire operation back a year." Olivia understood the weight of what he was saying. In this business, one season could mean the difference between success and failure, between keeping your land and losing everything. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the immediate problem. Her hands found the calf's hind legs, and she began the delicate process of trying to rotate the animal within the birth canal. The cow bellowed in pain, and Russell spoke to her more urgently, his voice low and soothing. "Easy, Bess. Easy, girl. We are trying to help you. Just a little longer." Sweat dripped down Olivia's face as she worked. The calf was large, which was both good and bad. Good because it suggested health and vigor, bad because it made the process more difficult. She could feel the animal's heartbeat, strong and steady, and she used that as her guide. Slowly, carefully, she managed to get enough purchase on the hind legs to begin turning the calf. I think I have it, she said, her voice tight with concentration, but I am going to need your help. When I tell you, I need you to pull on the front legs while I guide from back here. Russell moved immediately to position himself, his hands ready. Olivia continued to work, feeling the calf shift slightly, then a bit more. The cow was exhausted, her contractions weaker now, and Olivia knew they were running out of time. She made one final adjustment, felt something give way, and suddenly the calf was positioned correctly. Now, she said, and Russell pulled while she guided. For a moment, nothing happened, and then with a rush of fluid and blood, the calf slid free into the straw. It was not breathing. Olivia grabbed handfuls of clean straw and began rubbing the calf vigorously, stimulating its lungs and clearing the mucus from its nose and mouth. Russell watched, his expression frozen somewhere between hope and despair. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and then the calf coughed, sputtered, and drew its first shaky breath. There you go, Olivia whispered, continuing to rub the animal. There you go, little one. The calf was a bull, she saw, with a beautiful red coat that matched its mother's. It would be a fine animal if it survived the night. Behind them, Bess lifted her head, her maternal instincts overriding her exhaustion. She turned to look at her calf and let out a low, questioning moo. Russell sat back on his heels, his face transformed with relief. You did it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You actually did it. We did it, Olivia corrected, though she was smiling. The rush of success filled her chest, that familiar feeling of having done something truly meaningful. But we are not finished yet. We need to make sure Bess passes the afterbirth properly, and the calf needs to nurse soon, or it will be in trouble. They worked together for the next hour, monitoring both mother and calf, making sure everything progressed as it should. Russell proved to be a capable assistant, following Olivia's instructions without question. By the time the calf was on its feet and nursing, the moon had risen high in the sky, casting silver light through the barn windows. Russell stood beside Olivia, both of them watching the peaceful scene before them. Bess was contentedly cleaning her calf, who was nursing with enthusiasm. The crisis had passed. You saved my whole season, Russell said quietly. I am not exaggerating. If I had lost Bess and this calf, I would have been in serious financial trouble. The bank is already breathing down my neck about the expansion loan, and this calf represents a significant part of my breeding program for next year. Olivia looked at him properly for the first time since the ordeal began. In the lamplight, she could see that he was handsome in a rugged, weathered way. His eyes were a deep brown, almost black, and they held an intensity that suggested a man who felt things deeply, even if he did not always show it. I am glad I heard her from the road, Olivia said. Where is the veterinarian? Russell's expression darkened. That is an excellent question. Doc Pritchard has never failed me before. I hope nothing has happened to him or my foreman. As if summoned by the words, the sound of hoofbeats approached the barn. A moment later, a wiry older man rushed in, his medical bag in hand, followed by a younger man who must have been the foreman. Russell, I am so sorry, the veterinarian began, his words tumbling over each other. There was an accident on the bridge, a wagon overturned, and we had to help clear the road before anyone could pass. Is Bess all right? The calf? Russell gestured to the peaceful scene in the stall. Thanks to Miss Zimmerman here, both are fine. She handled the birth herself. Doc Pritchard looked at Olivia with surprise and then with professional respect. He moved to examine both cow and calf, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. After a thorough inspection, he nodded with satisfaction. Fine work, he said to Olivia. Breech birth? Yes, Olivia confirmed. I managed to turn the calf before pulling it. Not an easy task, Doc Pritchard said. You have training. My father taught me, Olivia explained. We raised cattle and horses in Illinois. The veterinarian nodded, understanding in his eyes. Well, you have a gift. Both of these animals are lucky you came along. After Doc Pritchard completed his examination and left with assurances that he would check on Bess again in a few days, Russell walked Olivia out to where her mare was still tied to the fence post. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of prairie grass and distant wood smoke. I need to pay you, Russell said. What you did tonight was worth more than money, but I insist. Olivia shook her head. I did not do it for payment. I did it because it needed to be done. Then at least let me buy you dinner, Russell said. Tomorrow evening at the hotel restaurant in town. It is the least I can do to say thank you properly. Olivia hesitated. She had not come west looking for romance or entanglements. Her plan had been to save her money, perhaps eventually buy a small piece of land where she could have a few animals of her own. Getting involved with a rancher, especially one who was clearly struggling with his own financial difficulties, did not fit into that plan. But there was something in Russell's eyes, a sincerity and warmth that made her want to say yes. And it was only dinner. All right, she agreed. Tomorrow evening at 7. Russell's smile transformed his face, and Olivia felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the exhaustion of the evening's work. She mounted her mare and rode back toward town, very aware of Russell watching her until she disappeared into the darkness. The next day passed slowly. Olivia worked at the dress shop, hemming skirts and taking in waists, but her mind kept drifting back to the barn, to the feeling of Russell kneeling beside her in the straw, to the way he had looked at her with such gratitude and something else she could not quite name. Mrs. Henderson, who owned the shop, noticed Olivia's distraction. You seem far away today, dear. Everything all right? Olivia realized she had been staring at the same seam for 5 minutes without moving her needle. I am fine, Mrs. Henderson, just tired. I had an eventful evening. Oh? Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with interest. She was a kind woman, but she loved gossip the way some people loved whiskey. Olivia decided a partial truth would satisfy her employer's curiosity. I helped with a difficult animal birth out at the Yates Ranch. It took most of the evening. The Yates Ranch? Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. You mean Russell Yates? That handsome young man who is trying to build up his cattle operation? I suppose so, Olivia said, returning her attention to the hem. He is quite the catch, you know. Mrs. Henderson continued, warming to her subject, came here from Texas about 2 years ago with just enough money to buy the land and a small herd, been working himself nearly to death to make the ranch profitable. Good man from what I hear. Honest, pays his debts, treats his workers fairly. Olivia absorbed this information, her curiosity growing despite herself. Does he have family here? No, he is alone. I heard his parents died when he was young, and he was raised by an uncle who was not particularly kind. He has been on his own since he was about 16, makes what he has accomplished all the more impressive if you ask me. The day finally ended, and Olivia went back to her boarding house to prepare for dinner. She did not have many nice dresses, but she did have one good one, a deep blue cotton with small white flowers that her mother had made before Olivia left Illinois. She brushed her chestnut hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully, leaving a few soft curls to frame her face. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above her dresser, she barely recognized the young woman staring back. Her green eyes seemed brighter somehow, her cheeks flushed with anticipation. She told herself it was just dinner, just a simple thank you, but her racing heart suggested otherwise. Russell was waiting in the lobby of the hotel when she arrived. He had cleaned up as well, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. When he saw Olivia, his face lit up in a way that made her stomach flip. You look beautiful, he said, offering his arm. Thank you, Olivia replied, taking his arm. You clean up well yourself. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Wyatt, which was not saying much given that the town had only been properly incorporated 5 years earlier. But the food was good, and the atmosphere was pleasant. Russell had reserved a table by the window where they could watch the street as the evening deepened into night. Over roast beef and potatoes, they talked. Russell told her about his ranch, about his dreams of building one of the finest cattle operations in Missouri. He spoke with passion about breeding programs and bloodlines, about the satisfaction of watching a calf grow into a strong, healthy animal. Olivia found herself drawn in by his enthusiasm, by the way his eyes lit up when he discussed his work. "What about you?" Russell asked, setting down his fork. "What brought you to Wyatt?" Olivia told him about her father's death, about her mother's hasty remarriage to a man who saw Olivia as nothing more than free labor and someone to control. She spoke about the decision to leave, about the desire to make her own way in the world. "I miss the animals most of all," she admitted. "Working in the dress shop is fine, and Mrs. Henderson is kind, but it is not what I was meant to do. When I was helping Bess last night, I felt more like myself than I have in months." Russell listened intently, his attention never wavering from her face. "Have you thought about working with animals again? Starting your own small farm, perhaps?" "Every day," Olivia said, "but land is expensive, and I am still saving. It will take time." "What if you did not have to wait?" Russell asked. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I know we just met and this might seem forward, but I could use someone like you at the ranch, someone who knows animals, who has a gift with them. I can pay you more than you are making at the dress shop, and you would be working with cattle and horses every day." Olivia's heart leaped at the suggestion, but caution held her back. "Russell, I appreciate the offer, but I barely know you, and you barely know me. What would people say if an unmarried woman came to work at your ranch?" "Let them talk," Russell said, then paused. "But you are right. I do not want to damage your reputation. Perhaps we could find a solution. My foreman's wife used to help with the household management, but she passed away last year. There is a small house on the property that is sitting empty. You could live there, maintain your independence, and work with the animals during the day. It would all be completely proper." The offer was tempting, almost too tempting. Olivia knew she should be more cautious, should take time to consider all the implications. But something in her gut told her this was right, that this opportunity was exactly what she had been hoping for when she left Illinois. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Russell said. "Take all the time you need. But I hope you will say yes. After watching you work last night, I know you are exactly the kind of person I need on my team." They finished dinner and walked slowly back through town toward Olivia's boarding house. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. They talked about small things, comfortable things, and Olivia realized she felt more at ease with Russell than she had with anyone in a long time. At the door to the boarding house, Russell took her hand. "Thank you for tonight. I enjoyed your company immensely." "I enjoyed it too," Olivia said, and meant it. "Will you think about my offer?" "I will," Olivia promised. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her small room, her mind racing with possibilities. Working at the ranch would give her daily contact with animals again, would allow her to use the skills her father had taught her. It would also give her steady income and a place to live, which would allow her to save money faster toward her eventual goal of her own land. But it would also mean spending every day near Russell, and she was already far too aware of the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her, the way his smile made her feel warm inside. Was she ready for that kind of complication? By morning, she had made her decision. She gave Mrs. Henderson 2 weeks' notice, explaining the opportunity at the ranch. Her employer was disappointed to lose her, but understanding. "I can see it in your eyes, dear," Mrs. Henderson said. "You were never meant to be cooped up in a shop all day. You need to be outside with the land and the animals. I hope it works out beautifully for you." The 2 weeks passed quickly. Olivia finished her remaining projects at the shop and packed her belongings, which were few enough to fit in a single trunk and carpet bag. On her last day, several of the regular customers came by to wish her well, and Mrs. Henderson gave her a beautiful quilt as a parting gift. Russell arrived with a wagon to collect her and her belongings. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hat as he helped load her trunk into the wagon bed. I want to show you the house before you make your final decision, he said. Make sure it meets your needs. The ride out to the ranch took about 30 minutes. Olivia watched the landscape roll by, the gentle hills covered in prairie grass, occasional stands of oak and hickory breaking up the open spaces. It was beautiful country, rich and full of life. The ranch itself was impressive. The main house was a solid two-story structure with a wide porch, freshly painted white. The barn where Olivia had helped deliver the calf was part of a larger complex that included several other outbuildings, all in good repair. Cattle grazed in the near pasture, and she could see horses in a distant corral. Russell drove the wagon past the main house to a smaller structure about 100 yards away. It was a cottage, really, with one large room, a separate bedroom, and a small kitchen. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was clean. I had my foreman and his son help me fix it up, Russell said, showing her around. Fresh paint, new mattress, repaired the stove. I want you to be comfortable. Olivia walked through the space, imagining herself living here. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and she could hear birds singing outside. It felt like home in a way that her boarding house room never had. It is perfect, she said. Russell's relief was palpable. I am glad. Let me help you unpack, and then I will show you around the rest of the property. They spent the afternoon together, Russell introducing Olivia to the various animals and explaining the daily routine of the ranch. He had 20 head of cattle at present, including Bess and her new calf, who was thriving. There were also 6 horses, including Russell's stallion Ranger and a gentle mare named Daisy, who Russell said would be perfect for Olivia to ride when checking on the cattle in the far pastures. My foreman is Jack Sullivan, Russell explained. He has been with me since the beginning. Good man, knows cattle inside and out. He has a son, Tommy, who is about 15 and helps out after school and on weekends. Between the 4 of us, we should be able to manage everything well. Over the following weeks, Olivia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn each morning, the cool air crisp and clean, and headed out to check on the animals. She had a particular gift for spotting problems early, noticing when an animal was off its feed or showing signs of illness. Russell came to rely on her judgment, often asking her opinion before making decisions about the herd. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side through long days. Olivia felt her body growing stronger, her hands becoming calloused again in a way that felt right. She loved the physical labor, the way her muscles ached pleasantly at the end of each day, the satisfaction of seeing tangible results from her efforts. But it was more than the work that made her happy. It was Russell. He was unlike any man she had known before. He treated her as an equal, respecting her knowledge and never condescending to her because she was a woman. When she suggested improvements to the breeding program or modifications to the feeding schedule, he listened carefully and usually implemented her ideas. They also talked, long conversations during lunch breaks or evening meals that Russell sometimes took at her cottage. They spoke about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their futures, opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Olivia learned that beneath Russell's serious exterior was a quick wit and a kind heart. He was generous with his workers, fair in his dealings, and devoted to his animals in a way that reminded her of her father. And somewhere along the way, without either of them quite meaning for it to happen, friendship deepened into something more. It was a hot August afternoon when everything changed. They had been working together to repair a section of fence in the far pasture, the sun beating down mercilessly. Olivia had removed her bonnet to wipe the sweat from her forehead, and when she looked up, she found Russell staring at her with an expression that made her breath catch. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. I was just thinking how beautiful you are, Russell said. How much happier I have been since you came here. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. Russell, I know I should not say these things, he continued, setting down the hammer he had been holding. I know we agreed this was just a working relationship, but I cannot pretend anymore, Olivia. I have fallen in love with you. The words hung in the hot air between them. Olivia knew she should be cautious, should think carefully before responding. But her heart was already answering, had been answering for weeks if she was honest with herself. I love you too, she said. Russell closed the distance between them in two long strides, his hands cupping her face as he kissed her. It was everything a first kiss should be, tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Marry me, Russell said. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me, Olivia. Yes, Olivia said, laughing with joy. Yes, of course, yes. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Wyatt. Doc Pritchard gave Olivia away, and Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears in the front pew. Jack Sullivan stood up as Russell's best man, and his son Tommy grinned throughout the entire ceremony. It was a simple wedding, but it was perfect. Olivia moved from the cottage to the main house, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at home. Russell was everything she could have hoped for in a husband, attentive and loving, passionate and tender. They worked together during the days and fell into each other's arms at night, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention they gave to everything else in their lives. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint management. The calf that Olivia had helped deliver, whom they had named Lucky, grew into a magnificent bull, exactly as Russell had hoped. His bloodline proved valuable, and Russell was able to expand the herd significantly over the next year. But success brought new challenges. As the ranch grew, so did the demands on their time. They hired additional workers, including 2 young cowboys from Texas who knew the cattle business well. The increased workload meant longer days, and Olivia found herself exhausted by evening, falling into bed too tired even to talk. It was during one of these exhausting periods that Olivia realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she dismissed it, attributing the irregularity to stress and hard work. But when a second month passed with no sign of bleeding, and she found herself nauseated by the smell of coffee that she normally loved, she began to suspect the truth. Doc Pritchard confirmed it. She was pregnant, about 10 weeks along if his calculations were correct. The baby would arrive in the spring, around April of 1886. Olivia sat in the doctor's office, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, feeling a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted this baby desperately, but she also worried about what it would mean for the ranch, for her partnership with Russell. Would he expect her to stop working, to become nothing more than a wife and mother? When she told Russell that evening, his reaction erased all her fears. He swept her into his arms, tears streaming down his face, and told her it was the best news he had ever received. Are you happy? He asked, pulling back to look at her. So happy, Olivia assured him. But Russell, I want to keep working, at least for a while longer. I will not be able to do everything I do now, especially as I get further along, but I do not want to give it up completely. Whatever you want, Russell said, we will figure it out together. That is what partners do. And they did figure it out. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, she adjusted her work accordingly. She stopped doing heavy lifting and let the cowboys handle the more physically demanding tasks. But she continued to check on the animals, to offer her expertise, to be involved in the daily decisions that kept the ranch running smoothly. The winter of 1885 was mild, which was fortunate given Olivia's condition. She grew large quickly, her belly swelling until it seemed impossible that there was still 2 months to go. Russell fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more, eat more, wrap up warmly even on relatively pleasant days. I am pregnant, not made of glass, Olivia told him one afternoon, though she was smiling. She loved his protectiveness even when it bordered on excessive. I know, Russell said, placing his hand on her belly. But you are carrying the most precious thing in the world. I cannot help but worry. The baby kicked against his palm, as if in response to his voice. Russell's face lit up with wonder every time he felt it move. In April, As the prairie burst into bloom with wildflowers and new grass, Olivia went into labor. It was late afternoon, and she had been helping Russell with the account books when she felt the first contraction, a tightening across her belly that made her pause mid-sentence. "What is wrong?" Russell asked immediately, noticing her expression. "I think it might be time," Olivia said, trying to stay calm even as her heart raced. Russell went pale. "Now? Are you sure? Should I get Doc Pritchard?" "Yes, now, and yes, you should get the doctor," Olivia said, breathing through another contraction. "But there is no need to panic. First babies take a while, usually." Russell sent Tommy racing into town for the doctor while he helped Olivia upstairs to their bedroom. Mrs. Sullivan, Jack's sister who lived in town and had agreed to help with the birth, arrived shortly after, her capable hands and calm demeanor a steadying presence. The labor was long and difficult. Hour after hour passed with Olivia gripping Russell's hand, her face sheened with sweat as the contractions intensified. Russell stayed with her throughout, ignoring Mrs. Sullivan's suggestions that he might be more comfortable downstairs. He murmured encouragement, wiped her face with cool cloths, and did not flinch even when she squeezed his hand hard enough to leave bruises. Doc Pritchard arrived as the sun was setting, examined Olivia, and pronounced that everything was progressing normally, if slowly. "First babies like to take their time," he said. "She is doing well." It was after midnight when Olivia finally felt the overwhelming urge to push. Doc Pritchard positioned himself at the foot of the bed while Mrs. Sullivan supported Olivia's shoulders. Russell stayed by her head, his face close to hers, his words a constant stream of love and support. "You can do this," he told her. "You are the strongest woman I know. You saved my whole season, remember? You can do anything." The memory of that night in the barn, of kneeling beside him in the straw while they fought to save Bess and her calf, gave Olivia renewed strength. She had done that. She could do this. With a final tremendous effort, Olivia pushed her baby into the world. The room filled with the sound of an infant's cry, strong and healthy, and Doc Pritchard held up a squirming, red-faced infant. "It is a boy," he announced, grinning. "A fine, healthy boy." Russell's face was wet with tears as the doctor placed the baby, cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket, in Olivia's arms. The infant was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like his father and tiny fingers that wrapped around Olivia's thumb with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," Olivia whispered, feeling a love so fierce it almost hurt. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Robert, after Russell's father, and his arrival brought a new dimension to their lives. Russell was a devoted father, constantly holding and playing with his son. He would sit for hours with Robert in his arms, talking to the baby about the ranch, about the cattle, about all the things they would do together when Robert was older. Olivia recovered quickly from the birth, her body strong from years of physical labor. Within weeks, she was moving around easily, though she took Doc Pritchard's advice and did not return to full ranch work immediately. Instead, she kept Robert with her, carrying him in a sling as she checked on the animals, teaching him about the ranch even though he was far too young to understand. The ranch continued to prosper. Lucky had proven his value multiple times over, siring strong, healthy calves that commanded premium prices. Russell was able to pay off his bank loan 2 years ahead of schedule and began saving toward purchasing adjacent land to expand even further. Life was good, but it was not without challenges. In the summer of Robert's first year, a drought hit Missouri hard. The grass turned brown, water sources dried up, and the cattle grew thin. Russell spent long days hauling water from the still-flowing creek on the back of the property, supplementing the animals' diet with expensive hay he had to purchase from Kansas. Olivia worked alongside him, her worry growing with each cloudless day. Their savings, carefully built up over 2 years, began to drain away as they spent money on feed and water. At night, Russell lay awake beside her, his body tense with worry. "We will get through this," Olivia told him, holding him close. We have faced difficult things before. I know, Russell said, but I hate seeing everything we have worked for threatened like this. I hate that I cannot control the weather, cannot make it rain. In August, just when it seemed things could not get worse, the rains finally came. Not a gentle soaking rain, but a violent thunderstorm that dumped water from the sky in sheets. Russell and Olivia stood on the porch, holding Robert between them, watching the rain drench the parched land. We made it, Russell said, pulling Olivia close. We actually made it. The grass recovered quickly, and by fall the cattle were sleek and healthy again. It had been a near thing, but they had survived, and Russell's reputation as a rancher who took care of his animals even in hard times only grew stronger. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, the ranch grew with him. Russell purchased the adjacent property, doubling their grazing land. They hired more workers and expanded the herd to 50 head. It was more than Russell had ever dreamed possible when he first arrived in Missouri with little more than hope and determination. When Robert was 3, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In the spring of 1889, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, a tiny, delicate baby with Olivia's green eyes and a surprisingly loud cry. Robert was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help take care of her. Russell built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original structure as a guest house for visiting cattle buyers. The years that followed were filled with the joys and challenges of raising children while running a successful ranch. Robert proved to have his father's love of cattle and his mother's gift with animals. Even as a young child, he could gentle a skittish calf or spot a sick cow before anyone else noticed something was wrong. Rose was different, more interested in books and learning than animals, but she loved the ranch in her own way. She would sit on the porch for hours, drawing the cattle and horses with surprising skill, capturing their movement and personality with simple pencil strokes. In 1892, when Robert was 6 and Rose was 3, Olivia gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Richard and Raymond. The ranch was now filled with the sound of children's laughter, with the controlled chaos of meals and bedtimes and endless questions. Russell thrived as a father, somehow finding the energy after long days to play with his children, to tell them stories, to teach them about the land and the animals. Olivia watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again, seeing in him the same devotion and care he had shown that first night in the barn when they worked together to save Bess and Lucky. By 1895, Russell Yates was one of the most successful ranchers in the region. His cattle were known for their quality, and buyers came from as far away as St. Louis to purchase his stock. The ranch that had once been threatened by one bad season now employed 12 people and supported multiple families. But for all their financial success, what Russell treasured most were the quiet moments. Sunday mornings with his family, everyone gathered around the breakfast table. Evening rides with Olivia after the children were in bed, the two of them checking on the herd under the stars. The sound of Robert patiently teaching Rose how to rope a fence post while the twins played in the dirt nearby. On a warm evening in late May, Russell and Olivia sat on the porch after putting the children to bed. Olivia was mending one of Robert's shirts while Russell reviewed the breeding records for the coming season. It was a peaceful domestic scene, the kind that had become familiar over the years. "Do you remember the night we met?" Russell asked suddenly, setting down his papers. Olivia looked up, smiling. "Of course! How could I forget? You were covered in blood and birth fluid, trying desperately to save Bess." "I thought I was going to lose everything that night," Russell said. "The cow, the calf, possibly the whole ranch. And then you appeared like some kind of miracle, and you just knew what to do." "We did it together," Olivia reminded him, as she always did. "I fell in love with you that night," Russell said. "Right there in the barn, watching you work with such confidence and skill. I did not know your name, did not know anything about you, but I knew I wanted you in my life forever." Olivia set down her mending and moved to sit beside Russell on the porch swing. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I never imagined my life could be this good," Russell continued. This ranch, our children, you. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. You saved my whole season, Olivia said, using the words he had spoken to her that first night, but giving them new meaning. You gave me a life I could never have built on my own. A home, a family, a purpose. You saved more than a season, Russell. You saved me. They sat together as the sun set, painting the Missouri sky in shades of gold and pink. In the barn, Lucky, now an old bull, but still magnificent, lowed softly to the cows. In the house behind them, their children slept safely in their beds. And on the porch, two people who had found each other on a desperate night 11 years ago held each other and counted their blessings. The years continued to pass in a rhythm that felt as natural as the changing seasons. Robert grew tall and strong, taking on more responsibility at the ranch. By the time he was 16, he was managing entire aspects of the operation, his judgment sound and his work ethic as strong as his father's. Russell watched his eldest son with pride, knowing that when the time came, the ranch would be in capable hands. Rose pursued her artistic talents, and with Russell and Olivia's encouragement, she began selling her drawings of ranch life to magazines in St. Louis and Kansas City. She had a gift for capturing the spirit of the West, the hard work and simple beauty of ranch life, and her work found a ready audience among city dwellers who romanticized the frontier. The twins, Richard and Raymond, were inseparable and shared Robert's love of animals. They competed with each other constantly, each trying to prove he was the better roper, the faster rider, the more skilled cattleman. It was all in good fun, and Russell refereed their contests with patient amusement. In 1899, as the new century approached, Russell and Olivia stood together, watching their children work with the cattle. Robert was teaching the twins how to cut a steer from the herd, while Rose sat on the fence sketching the scene. They were all growing up so fast, becoming their own people with their own dreams and talents. "Where did the time go?" Olivia asked, leaning against Russell. At 37, she was still beautiful, her hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with the evidence of years spent outdoors. Russell, at 41, had aged well too, his dark hair graying at the temples, his body still strong despite the decades of hard physical labor. "I do not know," Russell admitted, "but I would not change a moment of it." Lucky had died the previous winter, having lived to the remarkable age of 15. They had buried him in the pasture where he had spent most of his life, and Russell had stood over the grave with tears in his eyes. That bull had represented the turning point in his fortunes, the beginning of everything good in his life, because without Lucky's successful birth, he might have lost the ranch. And without that desperate night trying to save Bess, he would never have met Olivia. But Lucky's legacy lived on in dozens of cattle across the ranch, his bloodline strong and healthy. And in a way, he lived on in the family that his birth had brought together. As the 20th century dawned, the ranch continued to thrive. New technologies made some aspects of ranching easier, though the fundamental work remained the same. Russell invested in barbed wire fencing and a windmill to pump water, improvements that made managing the expanded herd more efficient. Robert, now 20, had begun courting a young woman from town, the daughter of the bank president. Russell and Olivia liked her immensely, seeing in Sarah the same practical intelligence and warm heart that had drawn them to each other. When Robert asked their blessing to marry, they gave it gladly, and in the summer of 1902, the ranch hosted its first wedding. Watching Robert and Sarah exchange vows, Olivia thought back to her own wedding day 18 years earlier. So much had changed since then, but the fundamental things remained the same. Love, commitment, the willingness to work hard and weather storms together. These were the things that mattered, that built lives and families and legacies. Rose announced her intention to attend art school in Chicago, and though the thought of their daughter so far away filled both Russell and Olivia with worry, they supported her dreams. The West was changing, becoming less wild, more civilized. Their children had opportunities they had never had, and Russell and Olivia were determined to help them seize those opportunities. The twins, now 12, showed no signs of wanting to leave the ranch. They spoke constantly of the day when they would run the operation alongside Robert, expanding and improving everything their father had built. On a crisp October evening in 1903, Russell and Olivia celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. The children had arranged a surprise party, decorating the barn with lanterns and wildflowers, setting up tables laden with food. Workers and their families attended, along with friends from town, including Doc Pritchard and Mrs. Henderson, both now elderly but still sharp and engaged with life. Jack Sullivan stood to give a toast. He had been Russell's right hand for nearly 20 years, and his own son Tommy was now the ranch foreman, having grown from the grinning 15-year-old at Russell and Olivia's wedding to a capable 33-year-old man with a family of his own. I remember when Russell first came here, Jack said, his weathered face creased with a smile. He had a dream and a mountain of debt and not much else. And I remember the night Olivia came into our lives, appearing like an angel to save old Bess and Lucky. I watched these two build this ranch from almost nothing, through droughts and hard times, through good years and bad. They did it with hard work and love, treating every animal and every person with respect and care. It has been the honor of my life to work alongside them, and I raise my glass to many more years of prosperity and happiness. The crowd cheered, and Russell pulled Olivia close, kissing her soundly to the delight of their children and the applause of their friends. Later, as the party wound down and the stars came out, Russell and Olivia walked together to the old barn where they had first met. Bess had died years ago, having lived a long life and produced many fine calves. But her memory lingered in this space, along with the memory of that desperate night when everything had hung in the balance. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not ridden past that evening? Russell asked. If you had not heard Bess and stopped to help? Sometimes, Olivia admitted, but I try not to dwell on alternate paths. We are here together, and that is what matters. You saved my whole season, Russell said, the words that had become something of a private joke between them over the years. But this time he continued, but it was more than that. You saved my life, Olivia. Not just the ranch, not just my financial future. You gave me love, family, purpose. Everything I am, everything I have, it is because you stopped that night, because you cared enough to help a stranger with a cow in trouble. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. After 18 years of marriage, Russell could still make her feel like the young woman who had nervously agreed to dinner, who had said yes to his impulsive proposal after only a few months of knowing him. And you gave me everything I never knew I needed, she replied. A home, a partnership, a love I did not think existed outside of novels. You saw me as I was and loved me for it, never asking me to be anything other than myself. They held each other in the barn, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the promise of the future, and both felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The following years brought more changes. Robert and Sarah had their first child, making Russell and Olivia grandparents to a baby girl they named Olivia Rose after both her grandmothers. Russell was unexpectedly moved by holding his granddaughter, this tiny new life that carried on the family legacy. Rose wrote regularly from Chicago, her letters full of descriptions of city life and art galleries and the strange, exciting world beyond Missouri. She was thriving, selling paintings for significant sums, making a name for herself in artistic circles. She came home for visits twice a year, and each time she seemed more sophisticated, more worldly, but she never lost her love for the ranch or the family that had nurtured her talents. The twins followed in Robert's footsteps, learning every aspect of the cattle business. They were innovators, always looking for ways to improve operations, incorporating new techniques and technologies as they became available. Russell gave them more and more responsibility, pleased to see his sons taking ownership of the ranch's future. In 1908, on a warm June evening, much like the one when they had first met, Russell and Olivia sat on the porch of the main house. Russell was 70 now, though still active and engaged with the ranch. Olivia was 66, her hair completely silver now, her hands gnarled from years of work but still capable and strong. They watched their grandchildren play in the yard, 5 now in total, ranging from baby to age 6. Robert and Sarah had built a house on the far side of the property, close enough to help with the ranch, but giving them privacy. The twins still lived in the main house, both unmarried so far, though Raymond was courting a school teacher from town. "We have built something good here," Russell said, reaching for Olivia's hand. "Something that will last long after we are gone." "We have," Olivia agreed. "A legacy of more than just cattle and land. A legacy of treating people fairly, of loving fully, of working hard and being grateful for our blessings." Russell was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking about something. You know how people always ask about the ranch's history, about how we got started?" "Of course," Olivia said. "Everyone loves the story." "I want to write it down," Russell said. "Not for publication or anything like that, but for our children and grandchildren, so they know where they came from, what we built, and why." Over the following months, Russell did exactly that. He sat at his desk in the evenings, writing in careful longhand, telling the story of a young rancher who had nearly lost everything on a desperate spring night in 1884. He wrote about an extraordinary woman who had ridden past at exactly the right moment, who had possessed the skills and courage to save not just a cow and calf, but an entire future. He wrote about their courtship, their marriage, the building of the ranch through hard work and determination. He wrote about droughts and good years, about children born and raised, about the satisfaction of seeing dreams become reality. And he wrote about love, the kind that sustained through decades, that grew deeper with each passing year. When he finished, he gave the manuscript to Olivia to read. She sat up late into the night, turning pages, reliving their life together through Russell's words. When she finished, she found Russell in their bedroom, waiting nervously for her reaction. "It is beautiful," she said simply. "It is our life exactly as it was, with all the joy and struggle and love. Our children will treasure this." They stored the manuscript in a wooden box, along with other family treasures, intending to give it to their children when the time was right. That time came sooner than expected. In the spring of 1910, Russell contracted pneumonia. Despite Doc Pritchard's best efforts, despite Olivia's constant care, he did not recover. On a rainy April night, surrounded by his wife and children, Russell Yates died at the age of 52. Olivia was devastated. They had shared 26 years of marriage, had built a life and family together, and suddenly he was gone. The ranch felt empty without him, the bed too large, the days too quiet. She moved through the motions of living, helping Robert and the twins manage the ranch operations, caring for her grandchildren, but part of her was missing. It was Rose who helped her begin to heal. Her daughter came home from Chicago and stayed for 3 months, her presence a balm to Olivia's grieving heart. They talked for hours about Russell, about memories and love and loss. And Rose convinced Olivia to read the manuscript Russell had written, which Olivia had not been able to face since his death. Reading Russell's words, seeing their life together laid out in his careful handwriting, was both painful and healing. Olivia cried as she read, but she also laughed, remembering the good times, the joy they had shared. And she realized that Russell had left her one final gift, a record of their love, proof that what they had built together would endure. Olivia lived for another 15 years, watching the ranch continue to prosper under her son's management, watching her grandchildren grow and begin families of their own. She took pride in knowing that the foundation she and Russell had built was strong enough to last generations. She remained active in ranch operations well into her 70s, her knowledge and experience valued by everyone who worked the land. Young cowboys would seek her advice, and she would share the wisdom gained from decades of working with cattle. She told stories about the old days, about Russell and their life together, keeping his memory alive for the younger generation. In 1925, at the age of 83, Olivia died peacefully in her sleep. Her children and grandchildren mourned, but they also celebrated a life fully lived, a woman who had loved deeply and worked hard and left the world better than she found it. They buried her beside Russell in the family cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone was simple: Olivia Zimmerman Yates, 1842 1925, beloved wife, mother, and rancher. But her real monument was the thriving ranch below, the strong family she had raised, the legacy of love and hard work that would endure for generations. Years later, Robert's grandson found Russell's manuscript while sorting through old family papers. He read it with wonder, learning the full story of how his great grandparents had met, how they had built the ranch from almost nothing. The story of a desperate night when a cow needed help and a woman with courage and skill had stopped to assist. The story of how love could bloom in the most unexpected places. He shared the manuscript with the rest of the family, and it became a cherished part of the Yates legacy. New generations read about Russell and Olivia, about that first meeting in a barn, about the words Russell had spoken that became a family legend. You saved my whole season. But as Russell himself had written, it was more than a season that was saved that night. It was a life, a love, a future that would extend far beyond anything either of them could have imagined as they knelt together in the straw, working to save a cow and her calf while the spring stars shone overhead. The ranch still stands today, managed by Yates' descendants, a testament to what two people can build when they combine hard work with love, practical skill with dreams, and unwavering commitment to each other and the land they love. And in the old barn, now preserved as a historic building, there is a plaque that tells the story of Russell and Olivia, of a night in 1884 when everything changed because a woman heard a cow in distress and stopped to help. It is a story of the Wild West, of cattle and ranching, of the hard, beautiful life of building something from nothing. But most of all, it is a love story, the kind that reminds us that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes saving someone's season means saving their whole life.